I was sitting alone in my apartment the night before Thanksgiving, staring at a blank television screen. 2 weeks earlier, my mother had called with that hesitant tone I knew too well. She told me I should not come to dinner this year. Her exact words still echo in my mind. "You might kill the vibe, honey." It hurt, but honestly, it was not a surprise. I had been pushed aside before, but this time, something was about to change everything. Before I get into the story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But what my mom did not know was that life has a funny way of rewriting the script when you least expect it. Let me take you back to where this all started. Growing up, I always felt like I was living in someone else's shadow. My sister Meredith was 4 years older than me, and from the moment I could understand anything, I understood one thing clearly. She was the favorite. Our mother, Gloria, never said it out loud, but she did not have to. Actions speak louder than words, and her actions screamed it every single day. Our father passed away when I was 12 years old. He worked at a manufacturing plant on the outskirts of town, and one morning a forklift accident took him from us forever. I remember standing at the funeral watching my mother clutch Meredith like she was the only thing keeping her alive. I stood 3 feet away and nobody reached for my hand. That was the first time I truly felt invisible in my own family. After Dad died, something shifted in my mother. She poured every ounce of her love and attention into Meredith. People always said Meredith looked exactly like our father. She had his sandy brown hair, his green eyes, his dimpled smile. I looked like my mother. Dark hair, brown eyes, the same narrow face. But somehow looking at me seemed to remind her of everything she did not like about herself. At least, that is what it felt like. The little things added up over the years. Meredith always got to sit in the front seat of the car. Meredith chose what we watched on television. Every fall, Meredith got new clothes for school, while I wore hand-me-downs from distant cousins I had never even met. When I asked my mother about it once, she just sighed and said, "Silas, we have to be practical. Your sister has different needs." I never understood what those different needs were, but I stopped asking. When we grew up and left the house, the pattern continued. Meredith went to college on the family savings account. Every penny our parents had put away went toward her tuition, her dorm room, her textbooks. When it was my turn 2 years later, there was nothing left. My mother shrugged and told me I would figure it out. So I did. I took out student loans that would haunt me for over a decade. I worked 3 part-time jobs during undergrad. I delivered pizzas until 2 in the morning, then woke up at 6 for my shift at the campus bookstore, then rushed to my afternoon job tutoring high school kids in math. Nobody in my family ever asked how I was managing. Nobody offered to help. When I got accepted into a prestigious MBA program with a partial scholarship, I called my mother to share the news. I was so excited my hands were shaking as I dialed her number. She listened quietly, then said, "That is nice, Silas." "Oh, before I forget, did I tell you Meredith just got promoted to senior analyst? Her boss says she is the best employee they have ever had." The conversation shifted to Meredith as it always did, and my acceptance letter sat on my kitchen table uncelebrated. I finished my MBA and landed a job at a mid-sized financial consulting firm. It was not glamorous, but it was a start. I worked hard, stayed late, took on projects nobody else wanted. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice. Within 5 years, I was a director. Within 8 years, I had my own office on the 14th floor with my name on the door. But my mother rarely asked about my work. Our phone calls, which happened maybe once a month, were always about Meredith. Meredith's new house, Meredith's vacation to Europe, Meredith's perfect life. 4 years ago, Meredith met Brandon Hartwell at a corporate networking event downtown. She called our mother that same night, gushing about this incredible man she had just met. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, they were married in an extravagant ceremony that my mother helped plan down to the smallest detail. I was invited, of course. I sat in the back row and watched my sister marry a man I had barely spoken to. Brandon came from a comfortable upper-middle-class family. His father owned a chain of auto dealerships, and Brandon had grown up with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Some people might call it self-assurance. I called it arrogance. He worked in sales at a marketing firm, and he never missed an opportunity to brag about his latest deal, his commission check, his corner office. The first time I met Brandon properly was at a family barbecue 2 months before the wedding. He shook my hand with a grip that was just a little too firm, looked me up and down, and said, "So, you are the other one. Meredith told me about you." Then he walked away to get a beer before I could respond. From that day forward, Brandon made his opinion of me clear. At every family gathering, he found ways to remind everyone that I was somehow less than. He would ask me questions in front of everyone, questions designed to make me look small. Still pushing papers at that little firm? "Silas, when are you going to get a real job? You still driving that old Honda? Maybe one day you will upgrade Buddy." I never corrected him. I never told him that I had been promoted to director 2 years earlier. I never mentioned that my little firm managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I never explained that I drove an older car because I was saving for a down payment on a house, not because I could not afford something flashier. I just smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. It was easier that way. But the comment that hurt the most did not come from Brandon. It came from my mother. We were all sitting around the dinner table at Meredith's house one Sunday afternoon. Brandon was holding court as usual, telling some story about a client he had impressed. My mother listened with rapt attention, laughing at all the right moments, nodding like she was witnessing greatness. When Brandon finished, she reached over and patted his hand. "Brandon," she said, "you are like the son I never had." She said it right in front of me, like I was not even there, like I did not exist. I felt something crack inside my chest, but I kept my face neutral. I excused myself to use the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror for 5 minutes just breathing, trying to hold myself together. That was 3 years ago, and I never forgot those words. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving this year, I came home from work exhausted. It had been a brutal day of meetings and deadlines, and all I wanted was to heat up some leftovers and watch something mindless on television. My phone rang just as I was sitting down. It was my mother. "Silas, honey," she started, and I immediately knew something was off. Her voice had that hesitant walking on eggshells quality that I had come to recognize over the years. It meant she was about to say something she knew I would not like. "What is it, Mom?" I asked. She cleared her throat. "Well, about Thanksgiving this year. Meredith and Brandon are hosting at their new place. And, well, Brandon and I were talking, and we thought maybe it would be better if you did not come this year." I felt the words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "What do you mean?" She sighed like I was being difficult. "Oh, you know how these things are, Silas. Brandon says you always kill the vibe. You just sit there not talking to anyone, making everyone uncomfortable. It would be easier for everyone if you just sat this one out." I sat in silence for a long moment. My leftovers grew cold on the coffee table. Finally, I asked the question that I already knew the answer to. "And you agree with him?" "Mom," she hesitated. "I just want a peaceful Thanksgiving, honey. That is all." "I understand," I said. My voice was calm even though my insides were churning. "Have a nice holiday, Mom." I hung up before she could say anything else. That night I did not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my life where I had been pushed aside, forgotten, dismissed. I thought about my 16th birthday when my mother forgot to buy a cake because she was too busy helping Meredith prepare for a job interview. I thought about my high school graduation when my mother arrived 2 hours late because Meredith needed a ride to an appointment. I thought about my MBA graduation, which my mother missed entirely because Meredith needed help moving into her new apartment. Every milestone of my life had been overshadowed by my sister. And now I was not even welcome at Thanksgiving dinner because I might kill the vibe. I asked myself the question I had been asking my whole life. What did I do wrong? Why am I never good enough? The answer I came to that night was painful but simple. Maybe I just was not enough in their eyes. Maybe I never would be. And maybe it was time to stop trying. The following week at work, something happened that would change everything. Our CEO called an all-hands meeting to announce a major acquisition. Our firm had just completed the purchase of Apex Solutions, a sales and marketing company with offices across the Midwest. The acquisition had been in the works for months, but the final paperwork had just been signed. After the general meeting, I was called into the CEO's office. Margaret Chen sat behind her desk, which was covered in documents and acquisition reports. She gestured for me to sit down. "Silas," she said, "I need someone to lead the integration of Apex Solutions into our operations. Someone who is organized, fair, and can handle difficult personalities. I want that person to be you." I was stunned. "That is a significant responsibility," I said, "which is why I am giving it to you. Starting the Monday after Thanksgiving, you will be the vice president in charge of the merger. You will oversee all Apex employees as they transition into our company. Their sales team, marketing division, everyone. They will all report to you." She handed me a folder containing information about Apex Solutions, including a list of all their employees and their current positions. I thanked her for the opportunity and returned to my office to review the materials. I sat down at my desk and opened the folder. I scanned through the organizational charts, the employee profiles, the performance reviews. Everything seemed straightforward until I reached the sales department roster. My eyes stopped on a name halfway down the list. Brandon Hartwell, Senior Sales Manager. I read the name 3 times to make sure I was not hallucinating. Then I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. The man who told my mother I would kill the vibe at Thanksgiving. The man who had spent years looking down on me, mocking my job, belittling my accomplishments. That man was about to become my subordinate. I felt a swirl of emotions I could not quite name. Part of me wanted to laugh at the sheer absurdity of the situation. Part of me dreaded the drama that was sure to follow. But a larger part of me felt something unexpected. Calm. Clarity. I made a decision in that moment. I would not tell my family. I would handle this situation with complete professionalism. I would not use my position to punish Brandon, but I would not let him disrespect me either. I would simply do my job and let the cards fall where they may. I spent the rest of the week preparing for the integration. I reviewed the files of every Apex employee, including Brandon's. His performance reviews were mixed. He was good at closing big deals, but he had a reputation for being difficult to work with. Multiple colleagues had complained about his attitude. His numbers were solid, but not spectacular. Not exactly the superstar he always claimed to be. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold. I woke up early out of habit, made myself a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, and sat by the window drinking coffee. Outside, I could see families loading into cars, heading off to celebrate with their loved ones. Children in puffy jackets carried homemade desserts. Fathers loaded coolers into trunks. Mothers hurried everyone along. I watched them and felt a familiar ache in my chest. But underneath the ache, there was something new. A quiet resolve. I decided not to spend the day alone in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. Instead, I drove to the office. The building was deserted except for a security guard who nodded at me as I signed in. I took the elevator to the 14th floor and walked down the empty hallway to my office. The nameplate on my door gleamed in the fluorescent light. Silas Turner, Vice President. I sat at my desk and worked for hours. I finalized the integration timeline, prepared presentation materials for Monday's meeting, and reviewed every detail of the transition plan. By the time I finished, it was dark outside. I had worked through Thanksgiving, but I did not mind. It felt productive. It felt good. What I did not know at the time was what was happening across town at my sister's house. Later, my mother would tell me about that dinner. Brandon had dominated the conversation all evening, bragging about the acquisition. He told everyone that the company buying Apex Solutions would need someone with his experience to lead the sales division. He predicted that he would be promoted to vice president within 6 months, maybe even sooner. My mother had beamed with pride. She told him he deserved it. Meredith squeezed his hand and said she always knew he was destined for great things. They toasted to Brandon's future success. My name did not come up once during the entire meal. The Monday after Thanksgiving arrived and I woke up before my alarm. I put on my best suit, a navy blue three-piece that I saved for important occasions. I arrived at the office by 7:30 and went straight to the large conference room on the 15th floor where the integration kickoff meeting would be held. The room was set up with a long rectangular table surrounded by leather chairs. At the head of the table was a nameplate. Silas Turner, Vice President Integration Lead. I straightened my tie and waited. The Apex employees began arriving at 8 o'clock sharp. I stood near the door and greeted each person as they entered, shaking hands, introducing myself, trying to put everyone at ease. Most of them seemed nervous, which was understandable. Nobody likes uncertainty, especially when it involves their job. By 8:15, the room was nearly full. I was about to close the door and begin the meeting when I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door swung open, and Brandon Hartwell walked in. He was on his phone, laughing at something the person on the other end had said. He did not look up as he entered the room. His suit was expensive, his hair was perfectly styled, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. Then he looked up and saw me. I watched his face go through a remarkable transformation. First confusion, as if he did not recognize me out of context. Then recognition followed immediately by disbelief. Then something that looked a lot like fear. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. The screen cracked against the polished hardwood, but he did not seem to notice. He just stood there, frozen, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. I walked toward him slowly, keeping my expression neutral. I extended my hand. "Brandon," I said calmly, "good to see you. I will be your direct supervisor from now on. Welcome to the team." His mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. There has to be some mistake, he finally managed. "You work here. I have been here for 8 years, I replied. Vice President for the past 18 months. He looked around the room desperately, as if searching for an escape route or someone to tell him this was all a joke. But all he saw were his colleagues watching the exchange with curious expressions. Nobody spoke. I gestured toward the empty seats. "Shall we get started?" Brandon stumbled to the nearest chair and sat down heavily. I returned to the head of the table and began the meeting. I walked everyone through the integration timeline, explained the new reporting structure, and outlined the expectations for the coming months. I answered questions calmly and thoroughly. Throughout the entire presentation, Brandon did not say a single word. He sat with his eyes fixed on the table in front of him, his face pale, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. When the meeting ended, I asked everyone to take a short break. As people filed out of the room, I called out, "Brandon, would you mind staying for a moment?" He froze halfway out of his chair, then slowly sat back down. The last person left, and I closed the door. I pulled out a chair across from him and sat down. The silence stretched between us heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, I spoke. "I am not going to pretend this is not awkward," I said. "But I want you to know something. What happens at work stays at work. What happens with family stays with family. I will evaluate you the same way I evaluate everyone else. Your performance, your attitude, your results. Nothing more, nothing less." Brandon nodded without looking at me. His jaw was clenched tight. "But I also want you to know this. I heard what you told my mother, about me killing the vibe. About how I should not come to Thanksgiving." He opened his mouth probably to make some excuse or defense, but I held up my hand to stop him. "I am not looking for an apology," I continued. "I just want you to understand something. The man you thought was not good enough to eat turkey with your family is the same man who now holds your career in his hands. Think about that." I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, I paused and looked back at him. "I will see you at the 9 o'clock departmental meeting," I said. "Do not be late." Then I left him sitting there alone. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded strange, shaky in a way I had never heard before. "Silas Brandon told us about your job. Why did you never say anything?" I leaned against my kitchen counter and looked out the window at the city lights below. "You never asked, Mom." She was quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I continued, my voice steady but firm. "For years, you have treated me like I was less than, like I did not matter. You let your son-in-law tell me I was not welcome at Thanksgiving. And you agreed with him." She started to cry. "Silas, I did not know. I did not understand. I never meant to hurt you. That is the problem, Mom. You never tried to know. You never tried to understand. You just assumed I was the failure you always thought I was." She sobbed harder, trying to speak through her tears, but I cut her off gently. "I need some time," I said. "I need space to process all of this. I'm not saying we cannot talk again. I'm just saying, not right now." I ended the call and set my phone on the counter. Then I stood at the window for a long time, watching the lights of the city flicker in the darkness. The weeks that followed were strange and transformative. At work, Brandon became a different person. The arrogance that had defined him seemed to evaporate overnight. He arrived early, stayed late, and threw himself into every project with an intensity I had never seen from him before. He stopped interrupting colleagues in meetings. He started listening more than he talked. When I gave him constructive feedback on his work, he accepted it without argument and implemented the changes. I treated him fairly, just as I had promised. When he did good work, I acknowledged it. When he fell short, I told him directly but respectfully. I did not go out of my way to make his life difficult, but I did not coddle him either. I held him to the same standard I held everyone else. The other employees noticed how I handled the situation. Several of them, people who had transferred from Apex Solutions, told me privately that they respected how professional I had been. They had heard the rumors about my relationship with Brandon. They had expected drama, favoritism, or revenge. Instead, they got fairness and consistency. It meant a lot to them. As for my family, the dynamic shifted in ways I had not anticipated. My mother called repeatedly in the first few weeks after that Monday meeting. She left voicemails full of apologies, sent text messages asking if we could talk. I did not respond right away. I was not trying to punish her. I genuinely needed time to work through decades of accumulated pain. Meredith called once. Her voice was awkward, uncomfortable. She said she had no idea Brandon had said those things about me. She apologized on his behalf, which felt hollow and insufficient. I thanked her for calling and kept the conversation brief. I started seeing a therapist. It was something I had resisted for years, thinking I could handle everything on my own. But sitting in that office talking through my childhood, my relationship with my mother, my constant feeling of never being enough, something began to shift inside me. My therapist helped me understand something important. My value as a person did not depend on my family's recognition. I had spent my entire life trying to prove myself worthy of their love and attention. But the truth was their inability to see my worth was their limitation, not mine. I could not control how they treated me. I could only control how I responded. I started focusing on the relationships in my life that were healthy and supportive. My friends from college who had always believed in me. My colleagues who respected my work ethic and leadership. A mentor I had met early in my career who had guided me through difficult times. These were the people who saw me clearly, who valued me for who I was. I learned to set boundaries without feeling guilty about it. I learned that saying no to something that hurt me was not selfish. It was necessary. 6 months after that Thanksgiving Christmas arrived, my mother called me a week before the holiday. Her voice was different this time. Quieter, humbler. "Silas," she said, "I want to invite you to Christmas dinner. And before you say anything, I want you to know that I am not calling because Brandon told me to, or because Meredith suggested it. I am calling because I have spent the last 6 months thinking about everything, about how I treated you growing up, about all the times I put your sister first, about how I let Brandon disrespect you right in front of me and said nothing. She paused, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. I made mistakes, she continued. A lot of them. And I cannot take them back. I cannot undo the hurt I caused you, but I would like the chance to do better, if you will let me. I stood in my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, and thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The years of feeling invisible, the constant comparisons, the phone call 2 weeks before Thanksgiving that had felt like the final straw. But I also thought about the person I had become over the past 6 months. Stronger, more self-assured, no longer desperate for approval that might never come. I will come, I said finally. But I want you to understand something, Mom. I'm not coming because I need your validation anymore. I am coming because I am willing to give you a chance. That is all I can offer right now. She accepted those terms gratefully. Christmas dinner was nothing like the Thanksgivings I remembered. The atmosphere was different, quieter, more thoughtful. When I arrived, Brandon met me at the door. He extended his hand, and when I shook it, there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Respect. Genuine respect. I have learned a lot from working with you, he said, and I owe you an apology for how I treated you before. I was wrong. I nodded and accepted his words. Whether he truly meant them or was just trying to protect his job, I could not say for certain. But I chose to take them at face value. Holding on to resentment would only poison me, not him. My mother hugged me when I walked into the living room. She held on longer than usual, and when she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "I am proud of you, Silas," she whispered. I should have said that a long time ago. I did not cry. I did not feel the overwhelming rush of validation I had once craved. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Peace. A quiet, settled peace that came from knowing I no longer needed her words to feel whole. The dinner was pleasant. Not perfect, but real. We talked and laughed and shared stories. Meredith asked about my work with genuine interest for the first time in our lives. Brandon was humble and attentive. My mother looked at me differently, like she was finally seeing me as an adult worthy of respect. Walking to my car at the end of the night, I stopped in the driveway and looked up at the winter sky. The stars were bright and clear, the air cold against my face. I realized something in that moment. The greatest victory was not becoming Brandon's boss. It was not proving my family wrong about who I was. The greatest victory was learning to validate myself, to recognize my own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. And sometimes the only way to heal is not to prove them wrong, but to stop needing them to see you at all. My mother might never fully understand me. Brandon might never truly respect me beyond what my position demands. But that is okay, because I finally understand and respect myself. And that is worth more than any seat at any Thanksgiving table. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most? Have you ever had to find your own worth when no one else would see it? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I would love to hear from you. If this story touched you, please give it a like. It helps more people find these videos. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss future stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes we all need a reminder that our worth does not depend on other people's approval. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community. I wish you the strength to see your own value even when others cannot. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.